With his AEW exit seemingly drawing closer and closer and closer, reportedly those in WWE absolutely do not want CM Punk to return to the company. We've got the latest details on that. WrestleMania 39 is getting closer and closer, and there are rumors of Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and others possibly set to return on the grandest stage of them all next year. Kevin Owens is out of action with a knee injury, forcing him to miss Survivor Series and miss a WarGames match. Got details on that. Last night was Monday Night Raw. Austin Theory, a week after unsuccessfully cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase, shows a much darker side on Raw last night. Drew McIntyre is impressing those in WWE with his hectic schedule right now. Gunther was reportedly set to be buried and sent back to NXT by Vince McMahon. The Women's WarGames match begins to take more shape with 2 more people added to the match. Speaking of Survivor Series, Finn Balor and AJ Styles is official for the big event next weekend. And we've got the ratings for last week's edition of SmackDown. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of World Wrestling Entertainment. As you have seen from that intro, we have a ton of stories to get into today. So let's start off talking about CM Punk and a possible return to WWE. Those that want it, those that don't want it, what is going on, what is the latest? We spoke yesterday about WrestleMania, Stone Cold Steve Austin, his name being put up there for a potential return to WWE. And another name that people have said they might like to see as a potential WrestleMania opponent for the Texas Rattlesnake is none other than the former WWE champion himself, CM Punk. Well, CM Punk and AEW may be negotiating their messy breakup right now, but attention is moving towards what is Punk going to do next, with suggestions that WWE Chief Content Officer Paul Triple H Levesque's previous stance on wanting nothing to do with Punk having softened to a, quote, never say never situation. It has been speculated that WWE may be interested in bringing Punk back to the company. The new reports of Stone Cold Steve Austin being in discussions with WWE for a WrestleMania 39 return have only served to amplify rumors of a potential Punk comeback for a dream match between the two. This may not be the desire of some people in WWE though, as it appears some sources are concerned with how things transpired in AEW and the negative reception that Punk had in the locker room whilst he was there. Dave Meltzer spoke about the feeling towards CM Punk in more detail on Wrestling Observer Radio, saying, quote, I know people in WWE who absolutely do not want him there, but they are not the people on the creative team. Everyone knows what happened in AEW. It's like, do we really want that? Do we need that? No, we don't need that. We don't really want that. But at the end of the day, it's not their decision. It's the decision of Nick Khan and Stephanie and Paul. Paul may just go in there and go, look, what happened? We don't need it. And they don't. They don't need it. He may just do that. If it was Vince would do it, I think, with that kind of money at stake. The question over the importance of name value and money is an interesting one that any company that recruits CM Punk would have to address. There is also still the potential legal/contractual issues. As Meltzer pointed out, there are still, quote, a lot of issues to be settled between Punk and AEW, something we are going to cover in today's AEW news video. Be sure to check that out when it drops later today. The last word was that Punk and AEW were negotiating a buyout of his contract, but there was a hang-up over the non-compete length of a clause that would be put into that termination. So it's an interesting one. I think I kind of look at it somewhat similar to, and it's not a totally comparable situation, so it is somewhat of a stretch of a reach, but I look at it when the NWO came into WWE in 2002, and essentially what happened was, allegedly, if you believe the reports, there was a vote in the locker room. Would we want these guys to return? Would we want Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall to return to WWE? All 3 people had been in the company previously. However, they'd then gone to the competition and they'd nearly put the WWE out of business due to the success of WCW. And to a man, maybe one or two, apart from one or two, they all said, we don't want them to return. They're a cancer to the locker room. They were part of the demise of WCW. Their attitudes and egos are out of control. We don't want to disrupt what we've got here, etc., etc., etc. They were brought back anyway because in the eyes of Vince McMahon, it was good for business, and you were bringing in 3 high-profile names that can make money for the company. The issue is, it's not Vince McMahon in charge anymore, it's Triple H. And Triple H has to make the call. Does he risk upsetting the locker room? Is Punk going to be on his best behavior? Is he going to get along with everyone? Is it worth it? Or is it best for business? That's the Triple H motto in storyline and in real life. If it's best for business, Triple H will do it. I lean to Triple H doing it. As I said before, I think in actuality, I know CM Punk didn't like the structure and the environment that was in WWE previously. By all accounts, that has changed somewhat. Now, it's always going to be this corporate layered environment with producers, with writers, etc. However, that has loosened to an extent, and those people that had issues with Vince McMahon have come back and have commented that it's a different environment. Now, CM Punk also had issues with Triple H. They have to be ironed out as well. But we've seen what happens when CM Punk is in an environment that's much looser, i.e. in AEW. We've seen what happens there, and that's not good. And I think CM Punk does need a bit of structure. So I still believe it will happen. Will it happen next year? When will it happen? I don't know. A lot of that is dependent on this AEW situation anyway. The negotiation of his buyout, the legal ramifications of it, to the non-compete clause. So we still don't know about that. And while some in the company may not want CM Punk there, I think eventually he's going to show up. We spoke a lot about WrestleMania 39 over the last 24 to 48 hours. We're getting closer and closer. It's 4 months away now, something like that, 5 months away, excuse me. And reportedly, WWE has big plans. WrestleMania 39 may be under 5 months away, but there's no doubt that WWE is planning big things for its Hollywood show. With rumors of a return for John Cena, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Rock, it looks like WWE is hoping to bring out one or all of its bankable names. That's not to take away from the names that could be available to WWE in the months leading up to WrestleMania. One name that has popped up in the conversation has been CM Punk, currently contracted to AEW. Speaking on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer stated there are still issues to be settled between Punk and AEW, saying, quote, if Punk was to become available, one of the dream matches fans would surely be clamoring for would be Punk versus Austin. Meltzer reported that WWE and Austin are currently in negotiations for a WrestleMania return, adding, it's all hands on deck. They've got 2 nights at WrestleMania. There's big money matches he can do. The idea of Punk returning could be on the cards, as I just mentioned. Any such agreement would have to be financially and creatively viable, though, to both parties. As I mentioned about this Stone Cold Steve Austin return, we do have an update on these discussions between the WWE and Steve Austin for that WrestleMania 39 return. In the most recent update from Meltzer, it sounds as though there is validity to these recent reports that perhaps Stone Cold Steve Austin could appear once again on the grandest stage of them all, similarly to how he did this year, except unlike this year, his match, whilst Kevin Owens was an official match, there could be, going out from the offset, this could be a big match and it'd be pre-planned ahead of time and much longer and more thorough than it was last year. According to Meltzer, there is smoke to that fire and there are discussions happening right now. However, how they may transpire or what details are being pitched to the former WWE champion and current WWE Hall of Famer aren't known. Meltzer went on to add that Austin remains in great shape, as was the case for the longtime veteran at WrestleMania 38 this year. Austin recently shared videos of him working out and keeping in great shape, which sparked rumors of a potential return match once again for Austin in the future. We've spoken about this yesterday. What I think I am going to do, keep an eye out for this, it's probably going to drop tomorrow. I'm going to do a possible opponents for Stone Cold Steve Austin. I want to get into that further and in more detail in a future video. So I think we're going to do that. So keep an eye out for that, certainly, because again, I think that's really worth talking about. And certainly there's a lot of interesting details we can get into there. So Stone Cold Steve Austin, that return still could be happening. Kevin Owens was set to return seemingly he might have been this week on television or last week on television for a possible involvement in the WarGames match, but it looks like that might not be happening. On the November 11th edition of SmackDown, WWE set up the men's WarGames match for Survivor Series, which looks to be the Bloodline, Roman Reigns, the Usos, Solo Sikoa, and Sami Zayn taking on the Brawling Brutes, Sheamus, Butch, and Rich Holland, and Drew McIntyre, plus a 5th partner to be announced. The favorite for the TBA spot would have been Kevin Owens, but it seemed like those hopes may have been dashed at the past weekend when Owens picked up an injury working a house show for the company. Dave Meltzer reported yesterday that Owens suffered a sprained MCL, and in another update, Meltzer has all but confirmed we've been robbed of Owens in WarGames against Sami Zayn. On yesterday's Wrestling Observer Radio, Meltzer said, quote, "I believe he was going to be in the WarGames match. That's not 100% confirmed, but it is certainly the talk. He was supposed to be in something as a surprise, so all adds up that it would be the WarGames match. If that was the case, this would cost him that." So basically, even if WarGames wasn't the plan for Owens, there was at least some kind of surprise he was penciled in for that now we may not be able to see, and we may not see in the future. It may be scrapped. There hasn't really been any clear indication who would fill the fifth man on the Brutes team for WarGames. If it turns out not to be Owens, you can let me know your thoughts, your predictions in the comment section below. Of course, last night was Monday Night Raw on the USA Network, and after unsuccessfully cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase last week, finally we've seen a more serious, vicious side of Austin Theory, and it appears certainly he's going to get a new push showing off this new intensity. After explaining his rationale for cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase earlier in a backstage segment, we'll talk about that in just a second, Austin Theory had a match against Dolph Ziggler on the show. Well, the match itself was an emotional roller coaster, including fans sort of cheering for Theory and even chanting, "This is awesome," with multiple near falls. It was an exciting effort until Theory seemingly snapped, showing off a newer, vicious side to his character. He went out of his way to punish the WWE veteran. With plenty of audible dialogue to punctuate the character shift, Theory could be heard reminding himself that he is not a boy, he is a man. And certainly we saw this more vicious side. As I mentioned, he explained his controversial Money in the Bank cash-in. This was in a backstage interview. Theory explained his rationale for his Money in the Bank cash-in from last week that drew the ire of fans worldwide, not just the fans in attendance. After Seth Rollins promised a live crowd at Raw last night they would get a chance to air their grievances with this star, he did his talking backstage. In a backstage interview with Kathy Kelly, Austin Theory made it clear he was no longer anyone's protege. Theory showed off a new intensity and drive as he passionately spoke about the experience of being the Money in the Bank briefcase holder during the historic reign of Roman Reigns. Addressing the situation, Theory said, "I was touted to be the next big thing and prove that on day one, and I did. I exceeded that expectation, and what did I do? I became the face of a franchise. Everyone thinks that I failed, but they're wrong, because I feel more alive than I ever have. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the briefcase. Let's talk about it was an anchor on Austin Theory." Going into specific detail, the rationale, the cash-in makes more sense as he detailed the ways in which Roman Reigns was always protected, if not by outsiders, then always by the bloodline. And that's why he chose to cash in on Rollins instead. Punctuating the rationale for the storyline turn, Theory said, "Roman Reigns is unstoppable, and that scenario of cashing in doesn't exist." He went on to say how he's sick of being known as the next, he is the now. And this then, as I mentioned, was interrupted by Dolph Ziggler and set up the match for later on in the evening. To be honest, look, the cash-in, as much as they try and explain it, and I appreciate them trying to explain it in the past, in the Vince McMahon regime, they just wouldn't have bothered. They just wouldn't have bothered to explain it. So I do appreciate them trying to explain it, add some logic to an illogical situation. It still was just that, though. It still was an illogical situation that makes no sense. They could have achieved what they did last night without him cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase. They could have had him snap. They could have had him failed to cash in without actually cashing it in on several occasions against the bloodline or against Seth Rollins or against whoever it may be, and then him show this side, of ditching the selfie gimmick, of getting angry, of showing more viciousness. They still could have done that without the dumb cash in, but it would appear that, those that are saying, Austin Theory's not getting pushed under Triple H, or Triple H isn't a fan of Austin Theory, that isn't particularly accurate, because what we saw last night was all the attention on Austin Theory. We saw a lot of people talking about Austin Theory, and we saw Triple H basically saying, look, I'm not a fan of the selfie stuff, I'm not a fan of the goofy stuff. What you need to be is, if you're going to be a top heel, you need to show aggression, you need to show seriousness, and you need to stop playing around. So I think they've achieved that, certainly, and I think we're going to now start seeing Austin Theory win matches. However, I do think it could have been achieved without the failed cash-in. Just my opinion, though. Drew McIntyre is on a pretty hectic schedule, according to reports, and it certainly is impressing people within WWE. Now, McIntyre may have ultimately failed in his bid to dethrone the tribal chief Roman Reigns, but the WWE superstar has been working his butt off nonetheless. Whether it's in the main event at Clash at the Castle with the biggest draw in the company or anything less, that doesn't seem to matter one bit. That WWE has a grueling schedule that comes as a surprise to nobody, but it appears as though McIntyre has taken that in stride and then some, come in recent weeks. According to PW Insider, the latest show of commitment from the Scottish Warrior has drawn plenty of praise, with the report noting that McIntyre went from the United States to Germany and Switzerland for SmackDown shows, and then on to Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia before heading to India for a new movie role set up between the WWE and Sony, before heading back to the United States for another episode of SmackDown, as well as 2 more live events. In total, he's been on the road for several weeks straight for WWE-related appearances. Most recently, McIntyre came to the aid of Sheamus, Ridge Holland, and Butch of the Brawling Brutes, who were battling it out with the Bloodline without Sami Zayn on this past week's episode of SmackDown. As I mentioned, he's going to be part of that WarGames match against the Bloodline. And people, this is the thing with that WWE schedule, is people don't see it. They don't. They see you on television every single week, and they just think, oh, you're just working live events. McIntyre's been in 4 countries in the last however many weeks. It's incredibly impressive, certainly. And he deserves a ton of credit. Again, he's not the only one, but that's the level of commitment you need, and that's the level of commitment that a WWE superstar has. So indeed, it's incredibly impressive. This was an interesting story because it's not the first time we've heard this, but a lot of people were pushing back on this. So since Triple H took over the creative direction of WWE as the company's chief content officer, there's been a number of noticeable changes from what WWE's previous CEO and head of creative Vince McMahon used to do. WarGames is coming to WWE. The 24/7 Championship has been retired. Previously released wrestlers have been brought back, including the likes of Karrion Kross, Braun Strowman, Bray Wyatt. Triple H has been certainly putting his stamp on how things operate in WWE. That's fair to say. And according to WrestleVotes via Give Me Sport, one such superstar who fits this bill is Gunther, saying, quote, Gunther is going to be around for a long time. He's got real potential as a heel, and he's going to be here for 10 to 12 years, stated WrestleVotes. He's going to open some shows, he's going to close some shows, but he's just going to be a solid match every night. That's what Hunter sees him in right now. Of course, he tore the house down in Cardiff with a Match of the Year candidate against Sheamus, and WrestleVotes claims people are starting to understand what he is now, with that match apparently helping. Quote, Hunter likes him, and he's going to give him a shot, they reported. Now, the Imperium leader had made a good showing on the main roster since capturing the Intercontinental Championship, but things had not changed behind the scenes, not changed behind the scenes in WWE. It appears all might not have been the case and all might not have been well for Gunther. This is because former WWE chairman Vince McMahon was apparently not a fan of the former NXT UK champion, particularly because of a July 4th match on Raw against R-Truth. Quote, I know that Vince McMahon just didn't like what he saw on Raw and was over him, like legitimately wanted to bury him, go back to NXT, that type of stuff, stated WrestleVotes. Now, again, this kind of draw not the ire of people on social media, but people push back saying, well, Vince McMahon couldn't have hated him or couldn't have wanted to bury him because he was the Intercontinental Champion. But at the same time, you got to remember, under Vince McMahon, the Intercontinental Championship didn't mean anything. It meant nothing. So him having the bout really didn't mean all that much. Apollo Crews won the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 37, and a year later, he's in NXT. Like, it's entirely possible. My point being, it's entirely possible for Vince McMahon to sour on someone. The bout means nothing in that instance, and it's not the first time we've heard it, so certainly it's interesting to see. And look, that would have been nonsense if he'd been sent back. So Triple H gets Gunther, and that's the most important thing. WarGames is on the horizon, and now we have 2 more people announced for the women's match. The field is nearly set for the women's WarGame match at the upcoming Survivor Series Premium Live event. Team Damage Control will now consist of Bayley, Io Sky, Dakota Kai, Nikki Cross, and Rhea Ripley facing off against Team Bianca Belair, which consists of the Raw Women's Champion, Alexa Bliss, Asuka, Mia Yim has now been announced, and of course still an unnamed partner. These 2 females, Ripley and Yim, were added to their respective teams on last night's edition of Raw after being offered spots in the historic match. So we're going to be getting that at Survivor Series. As far as who's that 5th person could be, I mean, previously I thought it might be Naomi and Sasha Banks. It still could be Sasha Banks. You know, the event is in Boston, so certainly that could make sense. And we might head into Survivor Series, and I think this is why how they might do it, similarly to how they did it with Kevin Owens at WarGames, NXT TakeOver WarGames in 2019. They might just leave it blank until the show, and then Sasha Banks comes out. It's a big return, and everyone's buzzing. I think they might do that. Speaking of Survivor Series, another match has been announced, that being AJ Styles versus Finn Balor. After months of on and off conflict, AJ Styles issued a challenge for Survivor Series WarGames. On last night's edition of Raw, Styles challenged Finn Balor to a one-on-one match at the event. Balor agreed to the match, and it has been made official. Of course, I recall when they faced each other at TLC back in 2017, and it was fantastic. That's when AJ Styles flew all across, I think it was from Chile, to the event after Bray Wyatt was actually out with an illness. So it's going to be a fantastic match. Certainly very excited to see that. Finally, we have the ratings for last week's edition of SmackDown on Fox, and the numbers, as pretty much they always are, pretty good. Per Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, last week's show drew 2.264 million viewers. This is an increase of 126,000 viewers from last week's show, which was pre-taped the prior week, of course, because they were going to Crown Jewel. In the 18 to 49 demographic, the show scored a 0.58 rating, which is way up from last week's episode, which scored a 0.48. The show featured the first round matches of the SmackDown World Cup tournament, the Usos facing the New Day, the next challenger for Ronda Rousey SmackDown Women's Championship. So again, WWE will be very happy with that. I think Fox will be happy with that, and especially that we're at the time of the year where there's not a lot going on traditionally in WWE, and the ratings are usually down as we head into the holiday season. So I think WWE will be very happy with that, and certainly as we head into WrestleMania season next year, with the Royal Rumble and, as I mentioned, WrestleMania on the horizon, those numbers should continue to increase. So I think they'll be pretty pleased. So there you go, guys. That's the latest WWE news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak for you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.